Welcome everybody to the live stream. We got some repeat customers from earlier today when we did the first day of the Forge Your Future Challenge. We've got Anthony will be joining me here in just a minute. I'm trying to remember why I said Verdino yesterday when I was talking about Anthony, and I think I had servo in my head for some reason. Maybe I was doing some kind of technical work, but it's Anthony Verdino, and we've got his book. I've got the cover right here for all of you. CBT Simplified, a simple guide to understanding cognitive behavioral therapy. And I'm excited to have this conversation because it's not a topic that we've really kind of explored all that much, both inside of my Time Crafting Trust community, or our Time Crafting Trust community, rather, but also in the podcast. Like, there have been plenty of things that we've explored that might feel outside of the realm of being productive and managing one's relationship with time and cultivating this state of productiveness. But there are elements that you wouldn't necessarily think are correlated to being productive and how they can help you. And I believe that CBT is one of those. I mean, jokingly, Anthony and I said before we hit record that before we went live, that there's other things that start with CB that could also help with some of this stuff, but we don't have a sponsor for that right now. So I'm not going to mention any of that. But without further ado, first off, thanks to everybody that's here. If you have questions or you have thoughts that you want to share, we can definitely add them to the mix. As you can see, we've got the chat going. So if you have any questions that you want to ask, they may make the podcast, the final recording. They typically do. I've got my own series of questions, but if you have some that come up during the conversation with what Anthony shares, please put them in the chat, and that way we can ask them, and hopefully Anthony can answer some of your questions. But without further ado, let's bring in Anthony Verdino. Anthony, thank you so much for joining me today for a productive conversation.
It's great to be here with you, Mike.
So first off, CBT, for those that are unfamiliar with the term, and I don't like starting off every conversation with, well, so tell us a little bit about, I mean, I could have started with, why'd you write this book? Why now? But instead, just because there are some confusion around maybe what CBT is, lots of acronyms out there, we don't want to have any confusion. So could you share a little bit about what CBT is and why I think you've taken something like CBT and simplified it for those that may be unfamiliar or for those that might be familiar?
Great. So CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, it stems back. It's actually from Aaron T. Beck. It's one of the most used therapy modalities in the world, mainly because it's so effective. And just in a nutshell, really, CBT is just teaching us the connection between our thinking, our actions, and subsequently how we feel, right? So think about a triangle whenever you think of CBT, or just look at my book cover. It's that in a nutshell, right? Of course, that all happens within the environment and body, but regardless of what happens in your day-to-day life or the kind of aches and pains in your body, as long as you have the right mentality and the right actions, you can control how you feel ultimately. And why did I simplify something that I just explained in a matter of seconds, right?
I'm guessing nuance has a role in that, maybe?
It definitely does. I mean, if you look at classic CBT, like when Beck created it, it has a lot of worksheets. It has a lot of daily check-ins with yourself. And in the modern world, there's just barely time for us to, go through all our emails, right? So I wanted to put it in a way that we could just look at it from one-page descriptions on each part of CBT, right? And the other side of the page is just a picture, right? So we can internalize it and remember it. I think that now more than ever in an age of technology, our mental health is suffering. It's getting in the way of our productivity, of course, as well. And I think we need something that's easy to digest, and even more after, something that's easy to refer back to so we can remember. So that's why I created this.
So one of the pillars in the work that I share, and I'm glad you brought up productivity, is this idea of aligning and what my definition of productivity is. And really, I think it's, again, speaking of nuance, a lot of people would say that productivity is about the classic, it's the state or the quality of being able to produce, especially in abundance. But for me, there's nuance in there. It's, how do you align your intentions with your attention? And then if you do that consistently, then that's how you become productive. I intend to do this. Here's how I'm going to pay attention to that. And the circle continues: action, reflect, action, that kind of thing.
Right.
But the idea of the cognitive triangle, right? Like this idea of the cognitive triangle, there's that link there: thoughts, feelings, behaviors. How do you see that model helping people better direct, again, the thing that they do have agency over, whether they may feel like they don't, but attention, because they do have agency over it, but it sometimes feels like it's being co-opted, corrupted. How can this help with them aligning their attention with what truly matters?
Well, so actually, it starts with, and I put this in my book under the basics section.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with self-monitoring. Now, I want to say something quick, Mike,
Sure.
that I think you find interesting. And we know that you have the productivity diet, right? Your book, wonderful book. I don't know if there it is. There it is. Not as fancy as my I'm reverse lineup, but I don't know if you realize this, and I'm happy that you mentioned looking at CBT in terms of productivity. You get CBT, whether you realize it or not. You get it, and you actually talk about it throughout your whole book. And
Okay.
I highlight that, right? So to answer your question first, self-monitoring is really not much different than regular self-assessment, which you mentioned, right? And you talk about. Right?
Yep.
I think that's the first part. So yeah, we're not going to sit here and write a whole journal about ourselves and day to day what we're doing each day, but we're going to be mindful of what we're doing. We're going to be mindful of those actions, right? And with that, our distractions, our triggers. And then the other part of it is how we think about just about everything, right? Saying it simply: is it positive? Is it negative? In this case, if it's getting in the way of your productivity, right? And it's something that you're indulging in too much. All right, now we know it's a negative action, right? So it comes from self-assessment, as you say, or self-monitoring first.
Okay.
Right? That's, to be honest with you, a big secret of therapy and why it's so effective to begin with is because it encourages this self-assessment, this self-monitoring.
Right.
In your mind right now, you could probably think of maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 things, right, in like minutes, but process absolutely none of it, right? A simple example I like to say is, in your mind, pigs can fly, right? We can visualize a pig flying with wings, but is that realistic? No. So we can imagine how we get in our own way just from our thoughts alone, right? And that impacts the actions. Does that kind of
No, that does. And what I mean, before we hit record, I talked to you about something that I discovered while I was cooking dinner, while I was getting all that stuff ready, and I was in the action phase of, like, I was devoting my attention to dinner, right? And as soon as that other thing popped up, I made note of it, but I knew that there was not the time or place for that. It's still in my head. Like, as I talk about it, to your point, I can imagine not only like what I need to do with that, but I can also imagine what it would be like to do that. I think is the key, right? Like, so, I don't want to share what it is because I don't want people to jump the queue and a whole bunch of people be able to do this thing.
Yeah, keep it secret.
But the point is that, there's this visualization thing, and I'm a very visual, like, I love the idea of, again, the spheres of attention. I see this bullseye and so on and so forth. So it totally makes sense. But what I didn't realize, and I think this is something you just brought up, is that I get it. Like, it's interwoven throughout. And so my question is, like, a quick follow-up is, do you think that CBT, as much as it's being more, it's spotlighting a bit more these days, people are starting to be more warm to the idea of therapy and so on and so forth. But do you think that the world of productivity that we've kind of adopted, the quantity, fast, go, now check off as many boxes, do you think that when we think about productivity in those terms, that CBT has a hard time making its way into that? Because, to your point, you're not spending a lot of time doing assessment. You're just spending a lot of time in action. So when someone is so like, I can't, I'm too busy, I've got these things to do, there's no room, there's no space for that to go. So maybe, I mean, this is a roundabout way of saying is that when CBT doesn't take up the time part so much, it's the space part.
I see what you're saying. Well, when you think about it, right, a lot of us nowadays have what they call VAST, variable attention stimulus trait, right? Because we have these phones that are so incredibly distracting, technology in general, right? So it
Hmm.
does get in the way of our productivity, for sure.
Right.
Um, you know, Here's the thing, right? When you think of CBT, try to think about it as a means of not necessarily just controlling the actions, right? Not
Hmm.
necessarily just reframing the thinking, right? It's
Yeah.
that feeling part, right? If we keep neglecting that aspect of it, now that's how we get these undiagnosed conditions, and we don't even realize how we're holding our own self back through it, right?
We
So,
spiral too. We spiral too, right? Like I actually,
right.
to your point, I was working with a coaching client and I said that you need, what if this, what if that? She goes, oh yeah, you're talking about reframing here. And she had done CBT. And so then she's like, I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize that what I did there was, and I am not like, I don't have those degrees that you have behind, like, I don't, but to your point, like so what I've been doing is she just said, would you be able to send me a prompt regularly that says, are you reframing? Like just that
Mm,
question. I'm like, oh,
wow.
if that'll be helpful, sure. And as soon as it's really weird because as soon as we had that eureka moment of,
Mhm.
oh, so if I apply the principles of CBT that she went through to what you're asking me to do in the realm of being productive,
Yes. Yeah.
that's unlocking it. And all she
Yes.
needed from me was to say, are you reframing? And she goes, yeah. Yeah, thanks. I needed that. Thanks. I needed that prompt.
I'm so happy you mentioned, like, we're talking about reframing now, because when I said CBT, I touched on one of four things that cover just about the entirety of CBT. Again, that you actually talk about in your book,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And one of those, cognitive restructuring, is this fancy way of saying reframing, right? For anybody who doesn't know what that is, I like saying it very simple: take a negative and make it a positive,
Mm-hmm.
or pull the silver lining out. What it is, from the psychological perspective, is we're challenging unhelpful thoughts, right? We're challenging biased thinking, right? So what does it do when we get in our own head, we start talking negative to ourselves, even if it's from a lack of action, right? It can motivate us to do, but you know what motivates you more? Actually motivating yourself and not beating yourself up. You know
Right.
what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah. If it comes from within, it feels better than if it's
Yes.
not. Right. Like
Yes.
it creates a forcing function that you go, oh, because it feels better when you come up with the idea than when somebody else you kind of gives it to you.
Another secret of therapy, right? Even if you're literally giving somebody a possible solution and they repeat it back to you in their own way, like they came up with it. Oh, that's great! You came up
Mm-hmm.
with that. Now they'll probably do it, right?
Right.
And when you look at reframing, so I want to, can I just mention something from your book that will
Sure.
teach cognitive restructuring, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
As you can tell, Mike, I'm gonna do this a lot here.
Okay. Yeah. No. Hey, man, this is promoting both our books at this point.
Listen, I'm a guest in your podcast. It's the least
Yeah.
I can do right now. So when you encourage, in your book, you talk about should, right? You mention quote unquote should, which, side note, should statements under CBT are considered these things called cognitive distortions, right?
Right.
They're normal biased thinking that all humans have at some point, right? You talk about reframing that into an opportunity, right? So we talk about from should to could, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something empowering rather than guilt inducing,
Yep.
right? That is cognitive restructuring. So that is the best way to control that part of the triangle, right? The thinking part. So
Mm-hmm.
again, thinking about the triangle, it's our thoughts, it's our actions, it's our feelings or emotions, right?
Right.
So we can't just control our feelings alone, but now when you start changing the negative in your mind to possibilities, right? When you start giving yourself a break mentally, now you're helping to contribute to the whole triangle. We didn't even get into the actions part yet, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
So does that?
it
Yeah.
does. And to me, as we're talking about this, I think that when I put that in the book, the should to could,
Mhm.
it doesn't necessarily say that you're going to have control over the outcome.
Right.
It says
Right.
that you have command over the choice. And that is, again, it's so funny because I have so many people that I've talked to, both friends, colleagues, clients, And some of them, like, again, I get an eye roll, or sometimes I get a lean in. It depends. But they're like, oh man, I'm so stressed. I don't like my job. I'm so overwhelmed, blah, blah. I'm like, well, just quit your job. And they're like, wait, I can't do that. I'm like, well, hold on. You could. Well, yeah, but I've got a mortgage. I got this. I'm like, okay, but that's not what I'm saying. You are making a choice to stay there, which is fine. Like, again, no judgment, curiosity over judgment, right? Gosh, Ted Lasso. So good. But the thing is that in all honesty, if someone was like, I'm so overwhelmed, I hate, I don't like my job, I'm not fulfilled. Like, okay, so what would it take for you to not do that anymore? Well, okay, I would have to you could sell your house. You could move to where we live in North America, like in Canada, like if we moved to another country with the money that we had that has our dollar, you'd be fine. You could do another, right? Like, so you do have, people talk about, I know that, I'll talk about my mother particularly, is she's like, how do you let your daughter move all the way to Montreal for university? Like, imagine I'm like, I Snapchat her every day. I see her every day. So what's the difference between me being, from Victoria to Montreal versus me being from Montreal to Belize or Portugal or the Philippines or whatever, right? It's still this,
like, why not let her move? Like, why would I not?
Right, but not only that, like, I'm not going to see her, like, I know that people say, oh, your family's really close, so on and so forth. I can't tell you how many times living close to my family, how many times we did not see our family extended over the ones. So that is an invalid reason as far as I'm concerned, especially since, like, it's not like my daughter has to send me a postcard or call me long distance to talk to me now from Montreal. We can literally chat in asynchronous real time, either visually or by text. So we could do that from Montreal to Victoria. We could do that from Australia to London. Like, so it's not the same energy for sure and proximity, but there's all choice around that. So it's really interesting when someone says, I can't do this. I'm like, that's not true. You are making choices. As soon as, and again, I think you're going to say, that's it, Mike. As soon as you decide that, you've taken agency. Therefore, now you can do something with that, as opposed to the denial of this is just the way life is. It's the and I know I'm meandering here a bit, but the movie The Way with Martin Sheen, the one where he walks the El Camino and his son dies on the El Camino and all that stuff. Spoiler alert, by the way, everybody. But I didn't tell you what happens. There's a transformation. But anyway,
still a great movie.
His son says, "You don't." What's the line? You don't choose a life, you live one. And I'm like, goosebumps, even just like, and that, the bottom line is that we have so many, we feel like we don't have choice, but it's more that it's easier to have the choice made for us based on what we believe, as opposed to actually going, okay, you know what? I could do this, but I'm not going to.
Right. It's like, it's when you think about, like, what I think about when you say this is how people use the word never a lot, right? Like, they never show up on time, right? Well, never, like, so they never came on time, right? It's the same idea. And using definites in themselves, in and of itself, is like a distortion, right? It's cognitive distortion. It's true. What you're saying makes a lot of sense, because when you think about reframing and using it the way you're describing it. Now, keep in mind, in my book, I keep it so simple, right? It's like we're looking at it from a positive lens, right? But if you go into it a little bit more sophisticated, what you're describing is exactly the point and what we're trying to get people to realize, right? Because we end up putting ourselves in, like, I try to think about it like I'm collecting a paycheck, right? These people are paying my bills, right? So we put ourselves into a box and think that this is what it has to be, but that's not true.
Yeah.
Right. Look at all the entrepreneurs. So I love what you're saying. It's a mindset, and a lot of the time we're not restricted to just one thing. So that's where acceptance comes in, right? It's another thing we talk about, because sometimes there are choices where it's like, okay, I'm making this choice, but I can't do anything else about it, right?
Right.
We get into a certain corner, right?
Sure.
So acceptance comes into play, but a lot of the time it's just not the case. There's always a choice. There's always something else we could choose, but we have to reframe our thinking, and that's where the active effort comes in to actually do that. to unlock everything else.
I mentioned in my book too, and I know with the idea of the Jedi, because we talk about you said no definites and absolutes, and right up there
I
is
see it.
Qui-Gon Jinn's lightsaber, because I talk about this in my book where I say, you know, like he didn't listen to the good or the bad, he listened to the will of the Force, like whatever was presented to him. And it's so funny because one of my favorite lines that gets often overlooked in the Revenge of the Sith is when Obi-Wan says to Anakin, just as Anakin is like flipped, is he says only a Sith deals in absolutes. And I'm like, that's a load of crap, because the Jedi do too. Like, you're not allowed to have relationships. You're not allowed, like, it's very dogmatic. And the only one that kind of in the active lore, you know, of Star Wars, for those that are Star Wars geeks that are watching this, and when I say geeks, I mean it in the most endearing of ways, because I am too, clearly. is yes, there's other probably Jedi that do live up to what Qui-Gon said, but nonetheless, it's like, hey, listen, you know, like I don't listen to the good or the bad, I listen to the will. I'm in the middle, and so one of the things that I think as we go through the idea of simplifying, and what I love about the fact that you've written this book is that it focuses on that topic. Like when we bring, like you mentioned, hey, Mike, in your book, you get it, you bring it in, but I don't talk about it explicitly. So you got to dig a bit. You obviously with expertise found it. But for somebody who is, first off, they hear the word therapy and they immediately recoil, or, and this is a two-parter. So how do you deal with somebody who recoils to the idea of, whether it's simplified or not, when they hear the term therapy, they immediately, you know, get closed off. But secondly, and this is becoming a very popular use of AI, is they start to use AI for that. Not saying that's inherently bad to a degree, but like anything else, more than moderation can cause it, because you mentioned biases and all that stuff. So the two-part question I have is, how do you help someone like lean into this beyond the simplification of it? Because the book does help with that for those that kind of recoil at therapy, but also for those that, you know what, I'll do therapy, but I'm going to get AI to help me with it, and what that looks like.
Well, I think so good question. So for the first part with the recoil, right? You know, there's a joke in therapy, right? That how many therapists does it take to actually change a light bulb, right? And the answer to that is zero, just one. But the light bulb has to want to change, right? So that's right.
Fair.
Think about it, right? So that's, you're dead in the water if you're coming to a therapy session because your spouse said you have to, right? Like you're dead in the water at that point if you're being forced to do it because you have to want it, right? Because that's the only way that you're going to get in your head and you're going to reframe. That's the only way that you're going to look at your actions and practice what we call behavioral activation, right? Like the only way you're going to actually take steps towards improving something that you see as an issue, which is why you're going to therapy, right? Or even to vent about something, is being willing to talk about it, right? Being willing to take the actions towards changing it. So that's really how I deal with it. Sometimes there are people who end up in front of me and they're doing it because their spouse said they have to, right? And what you do there is really like, you take away the scariness from therapy. The first thing I do is I explain that cognitive triangle. And I really just simplify that right in front of them so that they see it, right? And it disarms people a bit so that by next time they come, they start talking freely, you naturally establish a rapport, and it doesn't feel like therapy.
Right.
I can't guarantee that every therapist is going to do that, but that's how I deal with it. And another part to that question, to add on, really, I wrote CBT Simplified as a guide, not just to therapists themselves to help others, but also to individuals to be open to the idea of therapy. And if they don't go, because I myself am a therapist without a therapist. You know, I have a newborn. She's almost 4 months old now. I don't have time for it myself. I would love to, but I just don't have the time, right? But what it does is it also acts as a self-help book for those individuals to really start getting to work with themselves. Even the part about self-monitoring, or as you call it, self-assessment, I even talk about that. Hey, listen, maybe you do need to start texting yourself, right? Or starting a journal for yourself, right? So maybe if you don't want to talk to somebody else or somebody you trust, you know, there is a way you can do it, you know, solo.
That dovetails nicely into the AI part, for sure.
I was just going to say, yeah, I didn't plan that, by the way. It worked out. With the AI part, so, you know, I love AI, right? I know some people who've used AI to write their whole books, which I'm totally against, because at that point, it's like, what are we really reading at this point? Where is the
Mm-hmm.
actual expertise? You know, just
Yep.
Google things at that point, right? But I love AI as an assistant. And I think that for mental health, people can totally use it as an assistant. As a therapist, there's work being done. I mean, in the clinic that I work at, I remember I think a year or two ago, they were mentioning how they're working on bots that provide CBT in particular, right? So it can be a useful tool and we can get there. I can imagine in 10, 20, 30 years, therapists even being replaced by it. Of course, people are always going to want the mom and pop effect, right? They're going to want the real life person situation. Um, I just think right now it's too soon to depend on something like ChatGPT for your mental health. I think that if you pair it with something like my book or even in your book, right, for increased productivity, it becomes something a bit different, you know. But using that solely is just like having AI write the book for you, right? The same logic, I think.
Yeah. 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 I want to talk about some of the tactics. So some of the simplified strategies, like the 1, 2, 3 go strategy. Like it's a way to kind of get going. Um,
Yeah.
how does that fit alongside, say, more traditional productivity methods that others may have explored? Because
Mm,
like time theming that I've talked about, or attention
yeah.
pass, or any of this stuff. Because again, you mentioned that I alluded to CBT without even really outwardly mentioning it, and the same thing can work. It works both ways. So can you share that a little bit with the listener?
Absolutely. So let's look at that, right? Let's take us back to 2013 to your TEDx talk, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Love that, by the way. Let's make a due date. Let's make every day a due date, right? And how do we do that, right? There's another TED talk. I forget the lady's name, but she discussed an action initiation strategy as well. And I think I even reference it in my book too.
Mm-hmm.
So first and foremost, essentially what 1, 2, 3 go is we're literally counting to three, and on go, we move. These are called action initiation strategies. The one who gave the TED talk, she mentioned 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off, right?
Right.
Move, right? And she used that, I think, to kind of conquer her depression, right? So when we look at action initiation strategies, what's happening when we procrastinate, right? So procrastination is a symptom of anxiety. We're not saying
Mm-hmm.
that you have anxiety because you procrastinate, because we have symptoms of everything, right?
Yep.
Anybody can have symptoms of anything. But what's happening is you're thinking about doing something. You're thinking about getting rolling on an
Mm-hmm.
act, right? As you continue to think about it, in your mind, pigs start flying, right? It
Yeah.
gets heavier and heavier and heavier to imagine executing something than it is when you actually start it. So, for example, did you ever have a task that you had to complete and you knew it was a hard task, but you procrastinated on it? You thought about it a lot. Then once you actually started working on it, you realized it wasn't as difficult or as painstaking as you thought it would be.
Oh,
Has that ever happened to you?
all the time. It happened yesterday. Yeah.
Here we go. So let's look at what's happening, right? First of all, humans are negatively biased creatures, just like just about every animal in the animal kingdom. A squirrel is going to run away when you walk toward it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's thinking, this guy's going to hurt me. I'm
Yep.
going. Right? We're not that much different. So why I'm bringing that up? When we overthink or start ruminating, right, thinking about the same thing over and over and over again, at some point when we continue that form of thinking, we're going to get to a negative place. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to start negative at some point because we are negatively biased, right? So how do we stop that and just get to the initiation part, right? Start the act. We know it's not going to be as bad. There you go. Action initiation strategies, right? I mentioned in the book, if you have an analog clock, I'm not sure if anybody has one of those in their house anymore. When the second hand gets to 12, I'm going to move.
Yep.
Or I'm going to count to three on go, I'm going to move. Count down from five, and then I'm going to move, right?
Or Eric Partaker he's been on the podcast before. We'll link to it in the show notes. He has the 3 alarms. Like when one alarm goes off, his role changes. So he knows like, okay, I'm transitioning from this to that. Right. And by the
Wow.
way, Ksenia brings up, it's Mel Robbins that you're talking about.
That's her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mel Robbins. And so to me, that's fascinating stuff because, it comes up a lot where, I mean, I talk about reflection happens before and after every action, no matter what, right? Like we can't help but do it, which, you've alluded to. The problem is when we stay in reflection too long, right? Like, that's why journaling to me is so powerful, because journaling is because every day we are a new version of ourselves to a degree. So the bias, like if I was to, let's say I was to, well, I mean, and I can, like, I'm working on the first draft of my next book, and Sarah, who's moderating the chat right now, she's been told, like, we kind of said, hey, one of the things and I don't tell Sarah very much, but I'm like, please, I need you to do this. Like, ask me how the draft is coming every time we meet on Monday. And that's a trigger for me to go into it. But it's a task that, you know, if I reflect too much on the first draft, as you know, as a writer, you're never going to get the first draft done. But once you know that you've A, completed a first draft, B, you know it's the first draft. Like, it's not supposed to be the finished product. Once you have that, again, that knowledge, that understanding, that awareness, then it makes it easier for action. It's so interesting because we need to reflect to obviously learn and gain this awareness. But if we spend too long there, it can derail us at the same time.
Now we're not moving, right? We're just stuck in our head.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. See, you get CBT. You get it.
So Christina has a great point that when I promoted kind of the show here for our community, when I was promoting it I said, hey, the 20th of August, we're going to have Anthony on the show, but we want to talk about like your own lived experiences and overcoming challenges, which is what led you. So like the combination there, you can see the question on the screen. So can you tell me what lived experience of overcoming challenges you had to face and how CBT helped you with that?
Absolutely. When I was about 5 years old, I was in a tragic car accident that unfortunately took the life of my older brother. And with that, I broke both of my legs, both of my femurs. And my mom was at the time put into a coma. She broke her skull. So it was that recovery process, seeing what the loss of my brother did to my family, as well as, seeing my mom come out of a coma and being there for me. I actually shouted her out in the book as, for never giving up on me. In the midst of all that, having ADHD, she had to get her brain back and then figure out how to get me straight. And a lot of my desire to help people become a therapist and even write this book comes from that experience, all of that. And how CBT helped me. So here's the thing, and I say this to empower other people as well. A lot of us get CBT already. It is 2 + 2 = 4. I have to say it's straightforward when you really look at what it is, right? I knew what CBT was, and I knew how to provide it with others when I worked with them before I knew what it was. Right. And then I remember reading about CBT and saying, yes, that's what I do already. If we're thinking negative, we're going to feel that way. If we're focusing on negative things and how people treat us, that, and how they've hurt us, and we're thinking about the past all the time, right? Well, we're going to live in the past. That's where we're going to stay. And if we act anxious or depressed, well, we're going to feel that way, right? So it kind of happened naturally. I think a lot of the social workers, guidance counselors on the path there really helped me to be in touch with myself, to, I guess, see that. And of course, I think my mom encouraging a lot of reflection led me to becoming what I am today. And CBT kind of came with it naturally. If that kind of puts it all in a nutshell.
It does. And I noticed when you started talking about this, the interesting, because if you're watching the video of this, you could see your face change when you tell this story. And gosh, I'm such a nerd about this, but the idea of grief and vision saying, what is grief but love persevering? To me, when you share that story, it shows that there's no end to that. So you lost your brother, you're all of that stuff. It's not like it's a set it and forget it. It's not top of mind probably all the time. I would imagine it's not.
Right.
But when it shows up, CBT has helped you kind of navigate it, right? Not quash it, not dance with it, I guess, right? The idea of dancing with it for lack of a better for lack of an expression. And I think you know, there's ways that when you say people get it, it's like anything else. It can be co-opted in a way that works really well. And then in other instances it can. And as soon as you mentioned you know, the idea of, you know, if you're feeling this way, you're going to display it. Then there's the flip side of that where people go, fake it till you make it, you know? And I think
Which
that
work.
it is to a point, right? To a point, right? Because you can also fool yourself in the same process, right?
And you can start avoiding, which becomes, yeah.
And so I wonder if one of the symptoms of you know, the world that we live in, the things that we're trying to accomplish, is this idea of burnout, right? And I think that's probably where those things can really kind of, again, they can derail you. When you get burned out, the tools that you have, the wherewithal, the energy, the ability to pay attention kind of can become a problem. So I've got my question here, and it is, I've just got to find it here. See, I was so wrapped up into what we were getting into. Good thing we have edits for this. Is
take your time.
When it comes to here we go. Just one second. Yeah, I think oh man. Oh, here we go. So this idea of balancing and embracing imperfection, right? That you bring that up, and so this is the human side, and this is exactly what I was trying to get to, is like in this culture that is driven by like check boxes, all that stuff. How can CBT help us avoid burnout while still striving for meaningful progress? Because, like I said, if the fake it till you make it can ultimately lead to burnout because but why are you faking it till you, like, it's the why factor to me. But I'd love to see how, like, CBT, for those that aren't at that point and are feeling overwhelmed, burnt out, where CBT can play a role to help someone stay, not necessarily to be go fast now, but live in that state of productiveness.
I think that's a really good question. I mean, you look at that, right? Embracing imperfection. You know, I have not met in my whole career one perfect person ever, right? Right. That's a distortion. Perfectionism itself is a distortion. There's no such thing.
Yeah.
Right. There's no such, it's like saying you can't. Same thing. Right. It's like a definite. It's a good question. I think it comes in play where you start telling yourself that too. You accept that you are imperfect, right? Just like you accept that there's going to be burnout, there's going to be pain, right, in the world. There's going to be things that you don't like, right? Even if you get rid of burnout, right? Because we don't want that, right? You know, I think it comes from that place first, where you're looking at it like, I'm not going to get rid of negativity. I'm not going to get rid of imperfection. It starts with that, right? And then I think depending on the situation, it's the assessment phase, right? I don't talk about this in the book a lot, and this goes past CBT with a solution focused mindset. But as you described from the whole reframing thing, depending on how you look at a situation, it starts opening up your opportunities. You know, I'm trying to make sure I touch on and answer the exact question you had, but I'm not sure I'm hitting the.
No. I mean, it's the idea of where. So again, CBT and this idea of burnout. And again, I think reframing is what you're talking about. Like, I mean, ultimately, I think that's part of it, right? Because, you know, whenever we get a tool that helps us, whether it's an app, whether it's a meditation, whether it's CBT, whether it's whatever, there's a tendency, and I'm being very general here, to go, that's going to solve our problem. That's going to keep me from not getting things done. It's going to help me prioritize better. You know, I've got this fancy new planner. It's January 1st. No problem. For the rest of my life, I'm going to be like, we get these distortions.
Right.
And so you've answered the question to a degree, but I mean, I think it's the avoidance of falling into those traps of, hey, I have this tool, ergo this, I don't need to do anything else because the tool will do the work for me.
I get that. Yeah. And meanwhile, what we don't realize is doing that creates its own set of problems yet again, because
Right.
now we start becoming dependent on technology. I think there's a part of this that we have to touch on
Sure.
at some point, and I think it ties a lot of this in, right? Um, a lot of the time we neglect what we truly want. In your book, you mentioned as the diet metaphor that productivity can nourish us, but it's
Hmm.
about the ingredients that fuel us,
Yeah.
right? It's about the ingredients that fuel us.
Hmm.
So it's about choosing the ingredients that sustain your focus and energy, right?
Yeah.
That's behavioral activation. So we keep talking about the triangle, and we talk about the actions part in this case, right?
Hmm.
I think sometimes it's about balance. So since we can't get away from all negativity, right, and all of our problems and have something solve it all, because
Yep.
mind you, it would make life incredibly boring, right? What's it worth if it's painless anyway, right?
Hmm.
Um, when you think about that, too much time is spent focusing on just that, preventing burnout, the task itself. But what about what we do outside of the tasks, right? What do you enjoy, right? So I know some people who really like music,
Hmm.
right? For example, when's the last time you listened to music? Oh, I can't remember, right? So when you're coming home, to prevent burnout, sometimes it's not about just changing the job or the task, it's about your own self-care.
Yeah.
And we overlook that way too often. In social work school, there's one thing that they drilled into our head, and it's that self-care is a priority, right? At
Hmm.
least an hour for yourself a day. It could be with family, it can be with others, but anything that you really want to do that nourishes you, as you've mentioned, right?
Hmm.
And that can truly help with burnout. In fact, in my graduate program, they explained that. They said, look, if you don't practice self-care, you will burn out. And they
Right.
use those terms exactly, right? So I know again it's a loose way of answering your question, but I'm
No,
also doing it intentionally.
but I think the other thing is and it's true. If you are selfish in the right way, because people think self care is selfish sometimes, right? And of course,
Mm.
selfish has that like, oh, you shouldn't be selfish. But if you are selfish in the right way, you will be selfless as well.
Yes, 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 yes. And I mentioned that, right?
Yep.
In the book, I talk about you come first,
Yep.
right? The old oxygen mask analogy, right? If you don't put it on yourself, how are you going to help the person next to you, right?
Hmm.
It's self-care for self-preservation. When
Right.
we preserve ourselves, now we're able to actually give our most to everybody else.
Hmm.
But if we don't give it to ourselves first, now I'm giving you a burnt out Anthony. I'm giving you a burnt out Mike. What good is that?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yes.
And as we get close to wrapping up here, we talked about me cooking dinner earlier. Like I had a live stream for the Forge Your Future challenge for 2 hours, and I had an hour window. And Sarah, who's monitoring the chat here on YouTube, we had a brief get together, like a debrief after, and I had like 45 minutes between that and our conversation, and I
Wow.
knew I was making dinner, and I wanted. Here's the thing that I think that I've gotten dialed in better. It's always worth. So number one, I have an Instant Pot. No one else in the house really uses it. Why do I use it? Not because it's a gadget and I love fancy gadgets, although I do. This will allow me to make food, whatever for my family, and yet not neglect the things that I also need to do that are also for me and for my family. And so in that 30, I actually got it done in a 30-minute window. And I'm going to tell you exactly how I did it for those that are curious. I said I need to make pasta because I'm not going to be home for dinner tonight. But obviously, I'm not going to cook the noodles yet. Like, so I sat and thought with it, and I said, okay. And I make no secret that I've used AI for recipes because
Okay.
it tells me I don't get Googling is fine, but using AI, generative AI is actually better because I can say, here's what I have, here's what I want to
Right.
make me
Right.
a recipe. It's not going to be fantastic. It's going to be okay because that's where AI is at this point. I said, I have
Yeah.
an Instant Pot. I have 900 grams of ground chicken and I don't want to make the sauce fresh, but I want to make it flavorful. I don't want to slow cook it in my Instant Pot. And by the way, it knows what my Instant Pot is because it's in the project file. So give me a recipe and I need to have it ready for my son to take and serve himself at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
And spit it out. Doesn't even, I mean, it's doing the work. I then followed the instructions that it gave me all fresh ingredients. I gave it all the parameters. It was done. Food is going to be ready for my family. I won't even be here. It is cooking right now while I'm here. Why did I do that? That's both. That's self-care. I'm taking care of myself in the process. Maybe not in that moment. Let's be clear, because I was moving around. But when I'm out at 4 o'clock meeting my friend for a drink, I'm not going to be thinking, oh man, I screwed my family. Like, they don't know what I do at home most of the time because I'm here by myself. Like, all that spiraling. No, they know everything is ready. It's all good. And I've served them both doing this work that I do that earns me a living and being the stay-at-home dad that also, all of that.
Wow.
And yes, Mike, why did it take so long for you to unpack that? Well, because I'm telling the story, but in my head, it happened like that because I've been practicing it enough. And
it was
leverage,
like
leverage. And I will say that even if AI went away, I would still figure out a way to do it. It just makes, I would just know, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to do it in that. I'll have to think a bit differently. Maybe I'll just get creative and do it myself, whatever. But the point is that is a form, as weird as that sounds, at least this is my opinion. I love you. That's self-care.
That's the thing, but that's the beauty of behavioral activation, and self-care falls under that. It's what matters to you. It's what is meaningful to you. Like you just described it. And I think a lot of the viewers can really appreciate, if you really think about it, what you just said, right? Now, when you're having a drink with your friend, there's no guilt, right? You fed your family, you did your part, and you worked damn hard in between.
And I can be present in that moment with the friend, which makes it better for the experience for both of us.
Now, where's the burnout? No such thing at this point, right?
Nope. So, but it's so weird because people, again, I'm being general here. It's hard to see that forest through the trees, right? You know, it's hard to figure that out because, like, but Mike, that's just like, so like, how does that, but it does, like all these little things add up to a quote way of operating or whatever you want to say, because then I'm able to devote myself, my effort, my energy, my attention to the things that matter in those moments at that time, because I've set myself up. And now, by the way, there's the whole after action stuff that people do. I'm like, okay, did I do that well? Did they like the dinner, all that stuff? But that's not the concern right now, because I don't have any control over that right now. Later, if they say, Mike, the dinner wasn't good, I'm like, all right, well, I guess I won't make that again. Doesn't mean I'm just going to, but I won't do, well, I guess I should never use the Instant Pot, and I should never, like, again.
It's dramatic. Yeah. That's dramatic. Yeah. It's too extreme, I should say. Not dramatic, it's too extreme.
Gloria Jean, who's a member of the Time Crafting Trust community, put, do something first in your day for yourself before others can invade your day. And it's very, very true. Very true. And as a night owl, I have to flip that a bit. In other words, my day really doesn't start for creative work until the afternoon. So I'm doing stuff for others early in the day. So that way, to what we said, I can set that up. And then later in the day, if someone goes, hey, it's already done. It's already done. It's already done. It's already done. Don't even. And I've gotten to the point where I don't, for the most part, again, this is not bulletproof, is I'll send a text. Hey, dinner's ready. Here's what you need to know. Boom. You don't need to talk to me about it anymore.
It makes sense. It's like, this is why, you wrote about productivity, because, you get that very well. And it's very obvious from what you're describing here too. And what that one listener mentioned about doing something nice for your day, right? Gloria, I think that makes a lot of sense too. And we can do that. And even you can do this on top of your own system just by making the bed, right? You've probably heard it before. It's one nice thing to do for yourself. Make the bed, right? Brushing your teeth, right? I know it's simple, but it is self-care.
Making myself a nice pour over coffee to start my day.
There we go. It can be these things. And you know what makes them better, right? You mentioned this before, mindfulness. Take it in for a minute. Take a deep breath as you're doing these things. When the bed's made, right? Or when you're sipping that coffee, before you even taste it, take a deep breath in, maybe get some of the beautiful coffee scent in the nostrils too with it, right? Exhale slow and just focus for a minute. And then imagine the taste of, or think about the taste of that coffee as you're taking a couple of sips. I know it sounds a little woo-woo, right? Yeah. Some people are probably like, but they've done extensive studies on mindfulness and what it can do. In the beginning of today, we talked about variable attention stimulus trait, right? We're so distracted. grounding ourselves back by doing that allows the self-care to be that much amplified, right? And
Yep.
even when you're out having a drink, right? Same idea, right? Really look around in the surroundings. Look at your friend for a second, right? Taste that drink that you're drinking for a minute. Take it all in. It amplifies it. Now you're giving yourself more than just an hour, right? You're grounding yourself in that process as well.
Gloria Jean, by the way, says she was in the Air Force, so making the bed is just part of the deal.
You're preaching to the choir. She knows she gets it. She gets it.
Anthony, before we wrap up, just looking ahead, last question I have for you: how do you see CBT evolving as more people that they're looking for practical everyday tools? So not just therapy room techniques. I mean, we see that therapy is becoming more accessible than ever. We have alluded to some. There's obviously there's remote type of therapy, and there's a whole bunch of that stuff that's kind of technology has allowed for that to happen. So what are some of the how do you see it evolving to help you build a sustainable, productive life?
I'll take it back to something you said to answer that question, and how you described what you did today almost as second nature, right? Or pretty much as second nature. You didn't have to really think about all of that. You just kind of executed it, right? And I think that is the true evolution of CBT within all of us, right? No, we're not going to make the triangle a square, right? Like we're not going to add more to all of this. But as we practice reframing unhelpful thoughts, right? As we start looking at doing more of what we enjoy, right? And as we start feeling better because of it, and remember why, right? It will, or a lot of the time, I'm not supposed to say will, I can't make promises, but it usually starts becoming second nature, to the point where in my own life, as I keep applying it, I don't really think about reframing, right? I don't really think about doing what I enjoy. It's second nature, right? So when a cognitive distortion comes up, and they will come up for all of us, right? Because we're normal, imperfect humans, right? At the end of the day, you automatically start looking at the silver lining. You automatically start saying, wait a second, let me look at this for the full picture, right? It's not about changing ourselves. It's about adjusting. And I think over time, we easily make these adjustments using CBT, and that's how it evolves.
The book is called, and I'm going to get in here, CBT Simplified, A Simple Guide to Understanding Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. You can get it, I'm imagining, at Amazon variety, but where can people get it, keep up with the work that you're doing, and learn more about CBT?
Well, you can pick it up on Amazon. I have it in several formats. And you can also go to my website, anthonyverdino.com, to learn more about me and any future projects I'm working on. And hopefully I'll add a section on there where it says featured on, and I'll add this, today's interview. And then from there, it'll take you to my LinkedIn page too, where you can see me posting each week a new section of the book. Eventually, over the course of about 30 weeks or so, the whole book will be available on LinkedIn through posts, including those pictures. And it's just rewritten a little bit for social media.
Awesome. Hey, Anthony, thanks so much for having a productive conversation with me today.
It's been so productive and such a pleasure as well. And I hope to speak to you again soon.
All right. That's the conversation. Thanks so much, Anthony, for being here. What we're going to do is we're going to wrap up the live stream here. Anthony's going to stick around in the green room because him and I have some little post stuff to do. But thanks to everybody who watched the live stream, whether you watched it live, whether you watched the replay of it. Thanks to everybody who asked questions. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast if you want to hear the edited version of this. And we will see you later. Thanks again, everybody. And thanks to Sarah, by the way, for monitoring the chat as well. Take care.